New contract details ahead as the NFL's opening training camps today. But first,
we begin with the association. You know how there's been a ton of talk of the Thunder and their attempts to trade All-Star guard Chris Paul. Not so fast. It's a developing story here on SportsCenter. Our Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that the Thunder's attempts to trade CP3 are, quote, parked. This news comes 6 days after the Rockets traded Paul to Oklahoma City in exchange for All-Star Russell Westbrook. And Woj joins us now live. Woj, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that Chris Paul would not be in OKC for long. Why have these trade talks stalled?
Well, part of it is the timing of the trade. Salary cap space is full around the league. Teams have finished their team building, and Chris Paul's contract, 3 years, $124 million at 34 years old, is a factor. And right now there's an expectation with the Thunder, with Chris Paul and his representatives that he will likely start training camp with Oklahoma City. And the conversation about revisiting a trade maybe around December 15th, when free agents who signed this summer are eligible to be moved, that expands a trade market, or very well next year when there are 2 years left on his deal. But the Thunder welcome Chris Paul in. They have a team that will be competitive, not a contender in the West. And Chris Paul's been at Oklahoma City before. He played a season there with New Orleans. And given the alternatives right now, he's comfortable with starting up with them and maybe even playing the whole year if there's just not a trade to be done.
Wow. So that's shocking considering what the talk has been since the move was made. Woj, how does Chris feel about all of this?
Well, listen, I think at 34 years old, of course, Chris Paul wants to be playing for a team that's competing for a championship. That's not the Thunder this year, but he can make the best of the situation there. Steven Adams, Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who the Thunder would love for Chris Paul to mentor. This is a competitive team, and it's an organization he's comfortable with. Billy Donovan as coach, Sam Presti as GM. And just given the lateness in the marketplace and what the opportunity that just isn't out there for a salary this big to try to fit in, jam in somewhere around the league, he's going to have to be patient and wait, and he's fine with that, I'm told.
Okay, Adrian Wojnarowski with the very latest on the future of 9-time All-Star Chris Paul, who is still awaiting his first appearance in an NBA Finals as he enters his 15th season. Here's a look at his new teammates. Woj just mentioned a couple of them. Of course, now in the trade, which happened 6 days ago, Steven Adams, Dennis Schroeder do return from last year.
Episode of High Noon, we're going to talk about whether or not Gronk will unretire, whether or not the Sixers should split up Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Hot take. We're also going to talk about why the Pacers are so mad about being in Indianapolis, and also how Jadakiss eats his pizza. What was that? That was both impressive and terrible, but we begin today with Kevin Durant. Bomani, the GM of the Nets, Sean Marks, says he didn't talk to his new best player until after Durant announced he was coming to Brooklyn on Instagram. But this is what Marks told WFAN that Durant told him after all that. Quote, "I love the system. I love how you guys play. I see how hard you guys play. You were never out of games. We can never take you guys lightly." End quote. Bo, how important do you think the Nets system really is to KD?
Oh, I do think it is very important to him. I was reading through Marcus Thompson's book on Kevin Durant, which is worth checking out just to get some context, have it all laid out. A lot of things you knew, but to see them all together, it helps make sense of things. And if there's one thing Kevin Durant really cares a lot about, is playing basketball. So the idea that he would really be attracted to a team because of the system they have, that's not so hard to believe. That being said, you ain't even asked him no questions about the system before you decided to sign on to it. So I am not going to doubt that it was important to him, but I'm also not going to say necessarily it was the most important thing or the only important thing.
The system should be admired, you're right. In terms of the modern basketball regime,
you mean the dorky stuff?
Yeah, the dorky stuff, the things with the behavior of dorky stuff. They have been top 5 in free throw rate, top 5 at shots at the basket, top 5 in three-pointers. That's all the stuff that a modern smart player like KD should want. However, this is kind of like buying real estate. You're buying a house, and what is most important when you're doing that? Number 1 is location, and number 2 is the vision you have for the thing you're about to inhabit, because the furniture that's there now, and the system is kind of like that, That's cool. You might compliment it, but you also have your own ambitions, and that's what Kevin Durant is going to bring to the table when he finally arrives and makes this team his own too.
Yeah, when's that going to happen, though, and what's going to happen when he tries to do that? Because as attractive as he finds this system to be, they're about to have a weird year where he's in the incubator and Kyrie Irving is left to his own devices to figure this thing out, and then Kevin Durant comes in year 2. They've got a young roster that reminds me a lot of what the Celtics were when Kyrie showed up, a bunch of low spades that feel like they should be pulling in some books. So what is this all going to be? That I have no idea of. I wonder if Durant really believes that just the basketball part is going to trump all, because look, he went to the last place he went to in large part because of the system. It worked out very, very well for him, and also in some way it seemed to be a kind of sour experience. So what we get back to with Kevin Durant is what I feel like everything comes back to with Kevin Durant. Is this going to be the thing that makes you happy? Because look, if you have trouble finding happy, you're not alone in this world and having this problem, but it's more pronounced with him than I can think of with any other visible athlete of my lifetime.
Absolutely. And the thing that seems to make him happy that we've come to understand is the fact that he will be in New York. And so there is the system, which, by the way, we haven't actually heard KD himself talk about that yet. There's been a lot of secondhand stuff. Maybe it's the Nets saying this is really important to us. But the other thing that I think Kevin Durant really does value is the fact that he's in this city. And when it comes to the stuff he wants to install in this new house, he wanted to bring DeAndre Jordan. I don't think the Nets or anybody else really thought that made much basketball sense. They have Jared Allen already, but Kevin Durant wanted to bring his friends to this city. And by the way, where did DeAndre Jordan play last year? The New York Knicks. So I have a sense that Brooklyn was in this city and they weren't the Knicks, and that was a lot of why he wanted to do this.
Yeah, we'll see how he feels about that living in New York thing after he does it. It's one of those things that don't necessarily work for everybody. It's cool enough for me, and he's rich, and that definitely makes living in New York a whole lot easier. But the thing is, I want to live here. You don't really know if you want to live here till you live here, buddy. Trust me. Next up are Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Sixers embarrassed themselves for years trying to land two superstars in the draft. You saw it. And they landed Simmons and Embiid within 3 drafts. Good job, Hinkie. Embiid signed a max extension 2 seasons ago, and now Simmons has signed a 5-year, $170 million extension of his own. Now, our guy Ryan Russillo wonders if Simmons, with his utter lack of jump shot, is a bad fit with Embiid. Pablo, does worry you too?
It does worry me, and Ben Simmons' #1 goal should obviously be to learn how to shoot. But his #2 goal, given that that's seemingly pretty unrealistic at this point, it should be to get people to stop calling him a point guard. Because I feel like a lot of this, Bo, is about the fact that the point guard can't shoot. But what if you reframed him as what he actually is, which is a big man, a power forward who has incredible speed, incredible size, handle, court vision, and then it becomes a question of, is it a problem if the Sixers' 2 best players are their center and their power forward? And yes, I am worried about that given spacing and giving all the stuff about what you need if you're a big man, but it's not that weird if you reframe it in that way.
It is in 2019. You talk about the modern basketball environment and all this stuff. How many power forwards can't shoot? Forget about can't shoot. How many power forwards don't shoot? We're not talking about, wow, he can't make a shot outside of 15 feet. We're saying he can't make a shot outside of the paint. Now, how does that work as a power forward? So you're basically treating this like Taco Bell. Don't think of it as Mexican food and you won't be disappointed. Okay, cool. What kind of food is this? Because a power forward in the NBA in 2019 is not a dude who only shoots in the paint. That is not even a center at this point. So are you sure that just calling him a different name fixes the problem?
Well, I think it does make us think that maybe Ben Simmons can exist in this way. Maybe he is the entree of this weird meal. But what else is here? What else is on the menu? Because what the Sixers have done, which is strange, especially in 2019, is they've gone all in on size. So the 3rd best player is Al Horford. And Al Horford is one of these guys who defines definition too. Why does he do that? Because he can play in the post. He's excellent at doing that. But he's also a guy who could theoretically stretch the floor. Do they have enough guys around Simmons and Embiid that can play with them together that enables that? And that's where I have questions for how the team has been constructed.
Does that defy definition, or is that just a power forward in the NBA? Like what you described from Al Horford is not like there's only one of these guys, right? Like Giannis, that's a guy that defies definition. Al Horford is an NBA power forward in 2019. I don't know if there's any place in the NBA for a dude who does not shoot outside of the paint, right? Like if you took some of the older centers from back in the day and dropped them off here, if they can't do anything but on the block, there's no place for him. Think about a dude like Roy Hibbert, who went from being one of the best defensive players in the league to out of the league basically in 3 years. Ben Simmons has no more perimeter repertoire than Roy Hibbert does.
But hold on, there is a massive gulf between Roy Hibbert and Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is on a team that just took the NBA championships to 7 games. Ben Simmons is a player who is so much more gifted than Roy Hibbert was in the all-around sense.
But that's why he's not out of the league. But I'm asking, what, like you say, if he's not a point guard, there's no position that he plays other than point guard. Point guard is the best position that he plays because at least he's got the ball in his hands and there's a skill that he's got that he's really strong in that he can use all the time. If you turn him into a power forward, what does he then become? He becomes useless almost.
I have many concerns about the fact that I have made as many three-pointers in college and the NBA as Ben Simmons. But you mentioned Giannis before. It does seem like the Sixers are structured to play the Bucks. And what do when they play the Bucks? They put all those big bodies on Giannis. That seems to be the bet they're making, and I hope that it works.
All right, coming up next, will the